So what percentage of a house sale amounts to the transfer fees, just so that people can try and prepare themselves in their minds?
So maybe just to lead into it. So the transfer costs typically, there are a range of different costs, I'm sure we'll get into it, but it can be from tens of thousands literally to hundreds of thousands, even millions of rands in some instances.
And that's depending on the value of your house?
So it's depending on the value, and it's also depending on sort of how that property's been managed through its life cycle. And maybe when we get into some of the costs, I'll unpack that a little bit further.
Okay, super. So apart from transfer fees, what other costs, and of course agent commissions, I think everyone keeps those in mind because that's very publicized when you're dealing with an agent, but what other kinds of hidden costs could there be that people don't often take into account?
Yes, so I think on the buying side it's actually well understood. There's commissions and there's you've got to put deposits down for the bond, etc. But I think on the selling side, which I want to try focus on, that's really where the costs are not that well understood. I think people are trying to offload a property. Generally, it's at a point in time where they are going through some life-changing event, a birth, a death, a divorce, something like that. And in the ordinary course, cash is already pretty strapped. And then all of a sudden, there are these costs that crop up. So to go through them, so I think one of the most common ones is rates clearance certificates. So obviously, the rates and taxes have to be up to date at the time that it enters the deeds office. And because there's a period leading up to that, generally the councils want 1 or 2 or 3 months in advance payment to make sure that everything's up to date by the time the property transfers. And again, depending where you live and what your rates look like, that can be pretty significant. If you live in a sectional scheme or a homeowners association, there's levies, those have to be up to date. And again, that's what I was referencing a bit earlier. Depending on how that property's been managed through its life cycle, we've seen cases where people haven't paid rates and taxes for not even months, for literally for years, and that can add up with interest to very, very significant numbers. And obviously in today's economy, that's even more so. And then there's a couple of other hidden costs. So obviously, if you're selling, there's moving costs. You need to get out, you need to transport your furniture, whatever it looks like. Often the property, if it's in disrepair, needs some maintenance, a fresh coat of paint to make sure that it gets onto the property, get onto the market and can fetch the value ultimately that